Welcome to The Creative Shift. My name is Dan Blank, author of the book Be the Gateway and founder of WeGrowMedia.com. Today, I'm excited to bring to you my interview with writer Huang. And her story is just such an amazing illustration of the concept of the creative shift. She grew up in China. And she talks about how she grew up in a place where the idea of expressing yourself, of having permission to create, was not a part of how she grew up. She really found her kind of inspiration in reading other people's works. And later on, she came to the United States. She didn't really speak English or didn't speak much English. And she pursued becoming a computer engineer. She moved to the four corners of the U.S., Florida, Boston, Seattle, and Arizona, before eventually landing as a computer engineer at the University of California, Berkeley. But then she pursued her lifelong passion of writing. And she's published multiple novels and short stories and essays. And I just really appreciated her incredible honesty as she took us through every step of that process. And I think that so often we overlook the way that these things feel when someone makes a big change in their life and they're pursuing a larger goal, and maybe they're surrounded by people or systems that aren't really supporting what they want to do. And her sort of focus and her bravery in really developing her voice in her writing was just so inspiring to me. So I know you're going to appreciate this interview. You can find Yang at yanghuang.com, which is Yanghuang. I'll give all her links at the end of the show as well. They'll also be on the show notes, which you can find at wegrowmedia.com. Just click on the blog and podcast link. All right, here is my interview with Huang. Hey everyone, this is Dan Blank. I'm really excited to be chatting with Huang. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. I'm excited to be here.
I appreciate it. Yeah, your story is fascinating to me. And of course, I only know it as a casual observer, watching like YouTube interviews and seeing online. It was kind of like starting in childhood. And the place I usually start is this idea of when you were little, and I don't know whether you want to start at age 2 or age 6 or age 10, did you feel that you had permission to create?
Actually, never. Ironically, that prepared me to become a writer in another life. I grew up in China. Back then, we were always told what to think and how to feel. At home, I wasn't even allowed to cry, or my parents would mock me. It wasn't from a lack of love, but sheer force of conformity. There was always a right and wrong way to do things, a right and wrong way to feel. So everyone knew I was a little different. I never liked the conformity. I had a certain power, but was also pitied for it. I remember my father loved reading my essay. He was moved by fourth graders' writing. They wanted me to be protected from my gifting away, since writing is dangerous in any autocratic society. Chinese writers were persecuted too. The censorship took away the power of imagination. I never met a Chinese teacher who inspired me, but I was very fortunate to be taught by an amazing math teacher in high school. So, thanks to your podcast, I became interested in the creative process. In the last few weeks, I read an article called The Secret Superpowers of Highly Sensitive People. I learned about empath. I don't know if you ever heard of it. EMPATH.
I know that word from Star Trek.
Oh, okay. It doesn't mean you're empathetic. It means you actually could feel other people's feeling in my body. So, for example, if someone sent me an urgent email, I would know something was up or will wake up early. If my mother had insomnia, I wouldn't be able to sleep as well. So I suspect a lot of artists and creative people are highly sensitive people or empaths. I would recommend that you read up on it. It will help you set healthy boundaries. It's not like that other people try to alienate you, but the fact that they don't even understand you, so they cannot
Yeah.
support you.
You mentioned
Be-
that. I just want to, because you covered a
yeah.
lot there. You mentioned that growing up, you did not have this idea of freedom of thought or feeling. I'm an American. I feel like I've interviewed a lot of people from in America and this idea. And I feel like in a way, a lot of people, if they describe their own childhood, they might think that though, oh, my family had a way of doing things, or I had an interest that wasn't supported. But the way that you describe this, it
Mhm.
feels like it's so much more intense. Can you just talk a little bit more about what is that process like, that idea of you're being told what to think or feel, and how does that play out throughout a childhood? Because I don't want to just guess at it, and my only first person experience is from New Jersey in the United States.
Yeah. I always knew what other people want me to think and what to say. So it got to a point that I know the language was almost pointless because I just give them what they wanted.
Wow.
The language is like something. If I know what they want me to say, I just say it. I don't bother to express myself. As I got older, when I started school, became educated, I turned to writing because that's a private language. Um, I don't have to conform exactly, but I knew how I had to conform. I had no privacy. I couldn't keep a journal. Um, it was just not possible at all.
Is that because you lived in a small place, or is it because you just did not have personal possessions in the home?
I did not have a locked drawer.
Okay.
It was simple as that. My brother read my journals, and it, and my parents would look at it if they can.
Yeah.
When I knew they will look at everything I do, then there's no point to keep a journal. It's not a secret place. So I never was able to keep a journal. But writing was a way for me to have a little bit space that they can't quite invade, but they still will. So
When you're growing up, were there arts, or the idea of whether it's writing or creativity? Was there anything that kind of inspired you? Like you mentioned, you didn't have any teachers who inspired you, which again is unusual. I always find that there's often someone, and again, I'm thinking of people I've interviewed in different regions that, oh, I had this one English teacher, this one whatever teacher, and that was like their little gateway. Did you have anything like that in your childhood that was like the little possibility to the arts?
no, but I read books. I got inspired by books. I came across literature in translation when I was fourth grade. I read Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, and that truly inspired me. Chinese literature didn't, so ironically, because the censorship just really decimated literature.
Were these books you were finding in the library, or assigned in school, or outside of all that?
Library,
Okay.
not assigned at all. I just stumbled onto it because didn't have, I could not go browsing a library, a good library, anyways. So my parents um, just borrowed the books for me, and I read it, and it completely changed my life. So I turned to great books for education, really, writing. I don't think teachers taught me much at school at all. They just taught me, what would be a good way to get high scores. And I didn't even like writing that much at school. It just came easily to me.
Yeah.
I could just keep writing. It's just hard to stop. And they say, like, you turn in 5 pages. I would just, in no time, I would write 10 pages. I'm like, oh, it's too much. Where do I stop?
Were you pursuing literary translations because the fact it was in another language not only gave you a glimpse into a different kind of culture and art, but was that also shielded a little bit from other people, where like they're taking books out for you that they don't fully understand what's in it?
No, that's not the case. They
Okay.
could read it. It's a translation. Everybody could
Oh,
read it.
I'm sorry. That's my own. Yeah.
Yeah, it's translation. So it's the emotion that's not censored
Okay.
in those books. In China, all the emotions were censored. And so they have a different way of expressing emotions that it just become very opaque to me. It was I found it very hard to decode those adult emotions. Like literature in translation was very easy for me because the emotions were depicted on the page. Let me put it that way. I think the context of the story is all on the page. But in Chinese literature, there's a lot of unspoken things. And I didn't know these things. It's not on the page. I have to guess it. And as a child, I just couldn't piece together the whole thing. I do not know where the story came from. So I couldn't understand it. And I did not identify with these people, even though, there were people around me. uh, but these classic literature, everything's on the page, more or less. And I don't have to do a lot of research. It was easy to see what really went on with these authors. And I just gravitated toward them at a very early age. I never took to the popular literature in China at the time. Like I said, it's also that I found the emotions not very accessible to me. I don't know why it was like that.
I mean,
I was the
that's
only one who didn't read those popular books.
I mean, that's what I think is so fascinating about the arts is that it's that place where you get to have a preference and people see different things and some it's
Yeah.
like when usually when someone's a teenager they start gravitating towards music and there's a wide range and some like country and some like heavy metal and there's a billion things in between and I love how people find their preferences in different places.
Yes.
So as you were going through school, were you deciding or was it decided for you in terms of here's what you're going to study, here is going to be the focus in terms of a career that you're working towards?
I think it was decided pretty early on that writing wasn't really a career because the life would not be it would be too hard. You if you can, you would be writing for the propaganda machine. And my parents didn't think it was for me. So I thought they made the right decision. Yeah, I would have suffered, I think. But I met this great math teacher that he really just inspired me. He didn't know English or writing. He never showed favoritism to me or anyone else. But his passion for math was infectious. Using a triangle and ruler, he showed me how to think logically, be a problem solver, be independent and resilient, no matter what challenges I face. So I became a STEM major. That allowed me to come to study in the US and later study writing.
So that's a huge transition. What is that idea like of where does it start that idea of studying in the US? Was that an obvious path or was that expected or was that like a turn where it became an opportunity that you pushed for?
It became an opportunity. My uncle was a visiting scholar in US at the time, and I got into a very good university back in China, so I was proven to be a competent student, and I had potential. He helped me to come to study in the US, and I changed my major from physics to computer science. That was interesting too.
And you did you come to Boston?
No, I went to Florida.
Oh, okay.
I lived in four corners of country. I lived in Florida, Boston, and I went to Seattle for a little bit, and I studied at University of Arizona. Then we end up in the Bay Area.
Oh, that's amazing. So, what was it like coming to Florida? Because I can't even imagine the cultural shift on a number of different levels. What was that first experience like?
I felt like I went to the moon. It was a huge culture shock. Before I got on the airplane, I never even saw an airplane up close. They were just seeing them on TV, in the sky. I never saw them. Then I took four airplanes to get to Florida, which was very hard. In Tokyo, I couldn't find my next flight almost. Yeah, it was so challenging. But I was young. I was 19. And I think I always knew I would leave China someday. Part of me just knew. I thought I would go to France because I loved Victor Hugo. I think I will, speak French and just living France. And that didn't happen, but US is just as good.
I love it.
It was, yeah, it was very challenging at first. I didn't understand. Um, oh, I could read English tolerably, but I couldn't speak very well. Actually, I could hardly speak. And the American accent threw me off. So in class, I understood very little. I think first semester I just read the books, and the books were hard to read. There's so many pages. So those math equations were the easiest. I'm like, oh, then I'm on solid ground. And most of the time, I simply don't know. We didn't know what was going on. But adjusted quickly, I guess. That's you kind of adapt. You survive.
It sounds concurrently absolutely terrifying because it feels like you would be in total isolation, not just because you're in a different place, but the communication. And then, of course, the communication affects every kind of relationship, with the teacher, the fellow students, everything. But
Right.
on the other end, I imagine that there's a lot of sense of potential and possibility.
Right. I wasn't in total isolation though, because my uncle and my auntie were here, and I grew very close to them and other Chinese people, Chinese students in the community. So I wasn't in total isolation. As a matter of fact, they asked me to live in the dorm, say, oh, don't uh, just make Chinese friends. You need to learn English. They sent me to dorm. I actually liked it. I always like to live on the margin a little bit. I think it's just my temperament. I always like to be different. I actually never like to conform. So I didn't mind being one of the few Asian student and one of the few women in the engineering classes. I was completely comfortable with that. What I found really difficult was the language barrier. That took me years and years to overcome. And that was a solid barrier. Yeah. And I worked very hard at.
So as you're pursuing this, is it going from college to right into a job, into computer science, or what is that path like? And then where does writing kind of re-enter that mix a little bit?
Writing entered much later. Um, because I came as a student, I need to stay legal. There's a lot of immigration laws about what I could do. And yeah, I have very limited options. And at first, I did not know if I could stay in the United States. I may even go back to China. So I had to just work out to see what would happen for me. After graduation, I got a job, and they sponsored me for green card. And I realized I was able to stay. I didn't have to go back to China. Then I really feel this language barrier and this cultural barrier, to be exact, because I was a young adult in the professional world. I think all young adults, when they go into the work world, they feel very lonely. I feel like doubly lonely. I kind of want to fit in. Initially, I want to fit in. I want to understand American culture. So I decided to go back to school to study. I was wondering what I should study. I was like, should I study business communication? It will be easier for me. Or should I study literature? I decided that I love literature. I'm just going to go for the hard subject. I'm glad I did that. Yeah. So I got my BA and then got my MA, and I decided what I really want to do is writing. I went for my MFA. I went back to school at 23. Then I went for my MFA at 28. All this time I was working full time because as an immigrant, you just don't see um, the option to quit your job. I just did not have the emotional security, even though I could quit my job for a short stretch of time, but I was like, what next? It's not like I could make a living with this creative endeavor.
Yeah.
It was just completely not on the horizon. I mean, to this day, I just simply feel a lot of writers could not make a living with their writing. So I thought having a day job is good for my financial security, and my mental health as well.
So during that time, are you essentially, I mean, during the years you're in school, are you working a day job, whatever is 9 to 5, and then at night and weekends going to class and doing homework?
Yes, it's pretty much like that. And sometimes, I think for my BA, sometimes I went during lunchtime, mostly after the class. But I did have 6 months of almost full-time student, I think because the company moved to Boston. Yeah, no, the company just moved away from Florida. To Austin, wait, to Georgia. I can't remember. I think when moved to Austin, I didn't go with the company. Um, I just stayed behind and took 6 months. I think I took 5 classes to finish off my degree. Then I went to Boston College for my MA. Because I was a master's student, I had a little bit more flexibility. Um, but I took my first job, day job. I took a night job actually, from 2 to 12, 4 days a week. I did that for 6 months. It was actually very hard because you don't see daylight that much, you don't see people that much, and it really gets to you after a while, after 6 months. Then I went back to the day job. I think it's 9 to 5. I just took classes at night for a while. Yeah, I just did whatever I could, really.
That's intense.
Yeah, it's intense. I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I did, but I'm glad I did that because later I become a parent. As you know, parenting is very intense because I had all this intense experience when I was younger. I built up a kind of stamina for it.
That's a good way to put it. What
And
was
so,
the transition like from Florida to Boston? Because Florida and Boston are very different places.
right. In Florida, I was actually very happy. I didn't experience any, well, I guess because I was so new, I didn't understand um, how other people view me. Or I didn't care possibly.
Yeah.
Like in a way, I sometimes I didn't care very much about how other people view me because I grew up in an environment that was pretty oppressive, and I survived. I'm like, and this is like not much worse than what I went through when I was younger. So when I went to Boston, I felt my ethnicity was looked at actually, and people were very aware that I was Asian, and they assume I didn't speak English. They will come to me and say very slowly, "Do you speak English?" Which like nobody in Florida said that to me, even when I first arrived. So I first became aware of the race. I thought, oh, actually, America was a really multiracial society. For some reason, I just missed it. During my first 6 years, I felt really comfortable living in Florida, southern Florida.
Yeah.
And this is a metropolitan city. It had its pluses and minuses. I kind of feel I'm just a small fish in a very big pond. And you had a different kind of loneliness in that kind of place. And you also you want to find your group of people.
Mhm.
So at school, I even though the subject was very difficult for me, I studied British Romantic poetry for some reason.
I love it. That's so great.
Yeah, and all my professors were Harvard grads, and my my peers were so kind and friendly, and because I think I was the only one of the few Asians. I was definitely the only Chinese, the one who spoke English as second language. and definitely the only engineer. I was just a very strange creature. But they liked me. They accepted me despite all my limitations. So I feel yeah, I feel quite happy there. And I was happy at work too, to extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm the kind of person who I enjoy people. I like people. I tend to be happy. Um, if people just give me a little space, I'm just okay. Yeah, and I was kept very busy. Didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. Oh, my husband lived in New Hampshire. He was working on his PhD. If I did not find a job, I would have gone for grad school or marry someone. There's no other way for me to stay in the US. So,
It's interesting because I think that a lot of people aren't always aware of that. I know I'm not. Just that idea of, it's this idea of there's so many options and potential, but you're talking about, because you're coming into the country, you have a lot of limits or a lot of things you have to do to be able to stay in the country. I
yeah.
assume a lot of it's around employment, and that's just an incredibly huge deal, and it really focuses what your options are, I have to guess.
Yes. Yes. So after my MA, actually during my MA, I knew I do not want to do literary criticism. It was too difficult for me, and I just didn't have the passion for it. I wanted to do writing. I was working toward MFA, and then I would end in at University of Arizona. I loved Arizona. Um, it was beautiful. People was just so wonderful. Yeah, I feel like even though I only stayed there for less than 2 years, I think a year and 9 months, I could call that my second hometown. I was think my oh yeah, my um I loved Florida and I really loved Arizona. Yeah, and Bay Area.
That's amazing. And again, it's another huge shift because you're, coming into Florida, then going up to Boston, then you're going again to, as you said, the other corner of the country with Arizona. And here you're getting your MFA. I mean, so at this point, you're
Yeah.
deciding you're investing time and money and energy into writing. Was it what you hoped it would be when you got there?
Yes, it was, and more. Because I never got to write when I was younger. Like I knew a lot of writers start journaling when they were 7, 8 years old, or the latest when they were the teens. I never got to journal. Um, I started very late. I wrote my first short story when I was 26. I didn't know anything, but I've been reading all my life,
Yeah.
so that was in me. It was very traumatic to look at my own writing and to look at the writing I wanted to, emulate, the writing I aspired to. I was like, just like light years behind my goal. But so the MFA, the rigor of MFA program was great for someone like me. I had engineering training, so the rules kind of make a lot of sense to me. Like the narratives, um, like point of views, those things. They don't limit me. They kind of give me a framework. Like like how to build a story. So they give me the tools to write fiction. So I was very good. I was very grateful for that education. I made huge improvement in a very short period of time. My writing just, it came into place. Because remember, I had all these stories, like all my life, I had these stories. I never tap into them. I just need a language and some tool and, the way to do it to bring it out. And I had a lot of stories. So the education was very beneficial that way. It's not like I'm writing all my life, I'm waiting for new material. It
Yeah.
was the opposite of that.
I love how you describe how rigor and the rules and the intensity were exactly what you needed. Because I feel like there's so many writers where that's the opposite of what they want. They want the freedom and the lack of boundaries, and they don't want it to be intense. And it totally makes sense based on your background and what you're saying. It's so cool to see that as being something that is empowering.
Yes, yes. It's very individual. It really depends on what you need and for which book. So I found what I needed.
So when you got that degree, did you have a sense of what you wanted to do with writing beyond that, whether it was personal or professional?
I want to write fiction. It's hard to imagine being a professional fiction writer, but I went on for a number of years. I wrote a bunch of books. I mean, four, yeah, novels. But it's very hard to get them published. It took me longer to get them published than to write them, which in some ways kind of good. That means your writing did not go out of time. It was possibly ahead of its time, if you like to look at it that way.
So are these four novels that you wrote essentially in your own time? These are ones that, year by year you're writing these and you're trying to get them published.
Mm-hmm.
What's that decision like? 'Cause that's something I always think is interesting. A lot of people will write a novel and you were just so intense with it and you love that story. And then they stop because they think, well, now I'm going to go get it published. I'm not going to work on the next thing because that's getting distracted.
Oh.
Did you pursue it that way because it was like, well, I was trying to get the first one published, and while I was doing that, I was still writing, or was it just I just kept writing? I just had all these ideas.
I kept writing because publishing wasn't my goal anyways. Writing was my goal. I need to get those stories out. But it would be nice to have some acknowledgement over the years, but since it didn't come, I didn't beat myself up for it. I went on with my life. I think there was a period of time after I had my first child, I was at home for a while, for 10 months when I was nursing him and busy doing other things. Then I saw, I couldn't get published. Then I went back to work, actually. My husband wanted to support me. He said, you can just stay home and write. But I felt it wasn't good for my mental health, like being rejected all my life. And it was hard to see how I could. It wasn't just that being said no to. It was like I do not know how to get better. Like I do not know if I was doing something wrong or what. I just couldn't tell, because my work is not getting out there.
Yeah.
So I just went on with my life. I had a child, then I went back to work full time. After that, life got so intense. Then I had my second child. I was working full time. I've been working full time since 2004, all these years. Later, I found publishing is very intense too. It's a different kind of intense. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about working full time since 2004, and then the first novel was published, I think, in 2014.
Yes.
When did you graduate? When did you get the MFA? I'm trying to figure out the gap. 2000. Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a couple books, and yeah, I started Living Treasures, my debut novel, in 2003, after my first child was born. Then shortly after, I went back to work full time. I finished it 5 years later, 2008, and then took a number of years to get it published. Yeah.
What's that process like? Right in 2008, were you like, well, I'm going to start researching agents and all of that, or was it a different kind of process?
I got an agent pretty easily. They submitted for like a few months or a year, and they didn't have a taker, so they just give up on it. I think I went through 2 agents. Yeah. And
that right there is a big deal, because one thing, got an agent easily is also a lot of people's dream. But then, I mean, I've talked to so many writers who had an experience like that where they got the agent and they're putting it out there. Well, no one's taking it. We're going to keep going. And then with the agent anyway, it just sort of peters out. They feel they've done what
Yeah.
they can do. And now it's like I don't know, I don't want to call it a breakup, but it's that idea of you deciding, well, are we splitting?
Hmm.
That's a difficult
Right.
thing.
It was a difficult thing. So, like I said, I had other things going on in my life. I didn't really panic over this. It was just a side gig. Like I did it when I have time, which I almost never had time. So parenting, yeah, I think parenting was a center, a front and center in my life at that time. So yeah, this and the third agent, submitted for a while, still no taker, and she really believed the book. She loved the book. I think all the agents still loved the book, but they also couldn't understand why they couldn't sell it. I, it's so hard with literary fiction. I think I wrote to a famous author, Ha Jing. I say, "Oh, I'm writing literary fiction. I'm publishing." He said, "It's very hard to publish literary fiction nowadays." He's a National Book Award winner back, yeah, in early 2000s, and that's what he said. So everybody knew, and people who had MFA also kind of expected it as well to extend. That's why a lot of people with MFAs they have stopped writing after a while because you have to live. They use their good writing skills. They're probably still doing some creative things, but a lot of them are not writing fiction. It is just not creatively and financially sustainable to a point after a while. So I would actually feel lucky that I was able to do it despite everything, my family. And I don't know if I should say this. My father got cancer in 2014, right before my book. Yeah, 2013. He had stage 4 lung cancer. Yeah, my life just completely collapsed. And every day I was in the hospital. I spent a whole year in the hospital, I think. And you never knew what was around the bend. So my agent stopped submitting. I was submitting to the small presses on my own. And we had a periodical check-ins. Then I realized a year almost went by and I didn't do anything. And I couldn't. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should do something. So I went to Poets and Writers website. I looked up the small presses. I found this small press called Harvard Square Editions, and I submitted to them, and they wanted to publish it. I was like, really? After all these years, at a time like this?
Did you write back? Why?
No,
I love that.
I didn't want to jinx it.
No, of course, of course.
Yeah, and my father was very happy, and he was so
Oh,
proud of me. Even though they never supported me writing, they never said you could do it. I was never given permission, and that was something that I just had to live with it. I knew I would never get permission to be creative. I just learned not to ask for it and never expect it. So I just made a way for a writing life on my own. I didn't. That's why I need a job. So I don't need to ask for permission. I was like, then I don't care what other people think. But they knew how hard I worked because I didn't sleep, right? I didn't go out. I spent as much on writing as I could. What crazy was that just before, let's see, my father died in April, and my book got published in October. So my publisher asked me to record a clip on SoundCloud, right?
mhm.
I said I couldn't. I had to arrange a funeral. And she said, be strong. It doesn't take a lot of time. And she was right. It didn't take a lot of time, and I did it. I guess in life, a lot of times you just have to take one step at a time and do your best.
Yeah.
And
Well, When you're
Yeah.
doing so much, I think that one more thing, we never know what that one more thing that will kind of push us too far is, no matter how small it is.
Yeah. 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 So you need to have support network. I had my family and I had a writing group at the time. Um, they were very kind friends.
So
So
was this a writing group that you sought out and joined? How did you find them?
yes, when I moved to Bay Area, I went to UC Berkeley. I was looking for a community. So I went to UC Berkeley Extension School to take advanced fiction workshop and met a few friends there. We had a great writing workshop for 10 years. Yeah. Then everybody got busy with their life.
It's like the success story, 10 years, and then we just all got busy.
Yeah. Some people get married, have kids, get divorced, and moved on, get married again. Life goes on.
Sure.
Writing just part of the life, and you have to make it sustainable, in some way, and hopefully fulfilling. But I think it is fulfilling. That's why we're still doing all of us in the workshop, even though we don't meet anymore. We are all writing, so I think it's still success. If I were writing, that's success. I don't think you should beat yourself up about what how the world views it. I think in this, especially literary fiction, I think the best fiction, possibly, that ahead of their time, they're probably not gonna see big success immediately.
Mm.
Some of them do, and I really applaud it, but not all of them do. Because I read some very successful books and I do not like them. And I read the books in the workshop. This is so great, but I see they also have a hard time getting the work out. It's just the process you have to get through. This is a journey. It's a very hard one.
Yeah. What was it like having the book published? That feels like such a journey to get to that point.
Yes, I was very happy. It was very well received in the trade journals. I was published by a small press, and I was the only person working on this book. I didn't have a publisher, nothing. Publisher just give me a handout, say do this and do that, and I did everything. By arranging a funeral and and driving my kids to baseball and soccer and Chinese school and everything, and work full time. So I I just did all I could. I have to say, my way of approaching publishing, it was kind of a little bit haphazard. I just I did one thing is to send the books out to trade review, and that had the most results. I got reviewed by all the trade journals, in spite of uh, it's from small press, except for Publisher Weekly. So it was a huge success for the press. They were like, "Oh, we can't believe you got all this coverage."
That's great.
But it was my first book, so I didn't get the. I got reviewed by Mercury News, so that was also a big deal. I was pretty happy with what came of it. Obviously, I didn't do any marketing. I simply didn't have the resource or the bandwidth for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just did something, and I'm like, oh, I have to stop now. I have to do the family thing. That's just what I did, and I was pretty happy with that book.
How
I
did
was
it
very
feel to see whether it's a review or even hearing from a reader of like hearing feedback on the book? I always feel like that's an interesting thing, especially you say you grew up and couldn't really share what you wrote and you didn't write your short stories till your 20s. Was there anything about that getting feedback from other people that was, I don't know, I don't know, just compelling?
Yeah, I'm actually very comfortable with getting feedback because I went through MFA. I got
Yeah.
critiqued for 2 years, and I was in the workshop. I got critiqued all the time, and I knew this is a book about Chinese people. Not everyone gonna care for it. Um, I was just grateful for every little thing I got. And I'm very comfortable with being a criticism as well because I think I got criticized so much when I was growing up. And by the people who I care the most about,
Yeah.
And now they're just readers, the people in the world. I don't even know them. Why should I get upset? I never get upset by actually anyone who cared to say anything or just look it up. I'm just flattered. I became this person who always think glass is half full. Writing for me is really a beautiful privilege. If I lived in China, I would not be writing at all. So everything I could do it's already a plus. It's above and beyond. Um, it's more than what I dreamed of. Yeah. And I want to take that privilege seriously and want to keep writing. And I don't seek for approval. I always knew that, yeah, and also Chinese culture taught you to be humble. So if people criticize you, and yeah, there's a lot of built-in like self-protection for a person like me already. I I actually welcome any comments, feedback. I feel so grateful to be heard in any way.
So the next book you came out with was a short story collection. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Uh-huh. Short story collection. I published all the stories in literary journals quite easily, actually, within a year, but I couldn't get the book published.
I got one thing becomes easy, the next thing is difficult.
Yes, it's always like that. And it's for many writers too. They're always like breaking out, right? They're just on the verge of breaking out, but they never could break out. It's like that. And same thing with this book. I did I don't think I got an agent for it because they said short story is hard to sell. So I submitted to the contest. This was this was a contest I didn't know. I went to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. I knew a
Oh,
friend of mine won the contest. And I go, oh, I have a book too. Maybe I should try it. I did, and to my astonishment, it was selected. Um, I think out of close to 200 entries, they
wow.
selected two entries. You simply don't know how it was judged blind, by the way. The judge was like, "Is this a man or woman?" I need to know because my stories were written in five perspectives, and the judge did not know who this is. Yeah.
That's incredible.
I guess if you're out there, you keep trying. Hopefully, one day your time will come, and it was my time. So that book got published.
Did it get published because it won?
Yes, yes, that's part of the um, prize is to get
Ah, okay.
published. Yeah, that's how a lot of short story collections get published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it feel any different putting that one out in the world, or was it just, again,
Yes,
similar?
it was different. When I published my debut novel, I did not have a literary community. I was so busy with my life, with my family. When I did not know there was an extensive literary community in the Bay Area. But after I published my debut novel, I started going out to people's readings. I was out there all the time supporting other writers. So I began to have a writers community. I began to see them. For my second book, they kind of come around to support me as well. I had a few friends at first, then I got more friends. For my second book, I hired a publicist because my friend asked me to. She's, she said, you have to hire a publicist because otherwise there's not much you can do. I did. I worked with her. It was a great experience. I got into places that I didn't know before. I got on podcasts, for example. Before, didn't I didn't have means to contact the podcaster. Yeah, I just didn't have the bandwidth for all this work.
Yeah.
So it was very rewarding experience. With the third book, my literary community is growing, and more people come out to support me in various ways. I feel like I am in my tribe now. Of course, um, yeah, it's always there. It also takes time to cultivate all these personal relationships. It takes time for you to go out there to support other writers, like day in and day out, you know. You also, I didn't realize how much time it takes just to get on Twitter. It took me years and years to get on Twitter. It's actually a lot of work. I already had a full-time job, and writing is another full-time job. Actually, parenting uh, is pretty intense as well. So I never have time to do anything like 100%. I really need to be, very jealous with my time, how to divide it. I did I did everything kind of just what situation calls for and what I could, but I knew there are better ways to do it, but I'm not gonna beat up myself, about it. This is just the life I choose, and I think I'm happy with my life. And ultimately, this will keep me grow as a writer, as a creator.
Yeah.
Um,
I love how you describe the idea of the literary community, because I know a lot of writers, they look at the work and you say there's work involved in supporting other people and showing
mhm.
up and being a part of things. But I like
Yeah,
how you show that flip side of, they also come out to support you, and then it kind of gives you a career. And I think very often we think of career in terms of money,
mhm.
but there are so many other aspects, and one of those is feeling like I'm a part of something. I'm a part of people who have
Yes,
a craft and a skill and an art, and I'm in
yes,
there with them, and they see me for that, which is very special.
yes. And we share stories, we commiserate, and we share tips. And they invite me to write um, little essays, interviews. So all this is so great. Yeah.
So has it been different putting the new one, My Good Son, out in the world? Has that felt like an evolution?
Yes, I got into New York Times. And they mentioned my first two books too. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So how are you going through that launch, or what is it like putting it out there? Is it in terms of the themes and everything? Is it an extension of everything you've done? Is it something where you feel like you're able to put a bigger emphasis on the launch than other ones, or is it just, as you were saying, like you're kind of doing what you can, with where you are?
I had more time this time around because I was working from home, but also it's a different world now. It's COVID time. We're coming out of COVID now. But it's just everything is different. It's still hard to say because my book just launched on May 27th, so I don't know everything yet.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think I'll get covered by Chronicle and other places. Yeah, I don't. Things are still forthcoming. I think I'm pretty happy so far. But obviously, we can always have more. But what what excites me most is that my success gives me permission to write. It I came to success really with an eye for that. Just it gives me the permission to create, so I can continue to write. I know people liked it, and I will write more. Yeah. Even if they don't like it, if it elicits some response, because it's not possible that a book is liked by everybody. There's a saying that if you're there's nothing's truly universal. If your story goes out to make love to the world, and you open the window, your story goes out to make love to the world, it will catch pneumonia. You will only speak to a certain type of readers, but
Yeah.
if you get them, that's great. And I'm beginning to find out what kind of readers my books attract. And and I'm very grateful to see them, other writers, and what other writers I attract. So they materialize for me, and that was a beautiful thing.
I love that. Are you working on the next book or the next piece?
Yeah, I actually have a book almost done. I want to get it out. Based on my past experience, it could take years. I will see. I hope this one will have a smooth, easier journey into the world. But whatever journey it takes to the world, I think I will just do my best and not second guess myself. And most important thing is just to have this permission to create and just to continue to write and hopefully get better, because you don't always know if you're getting better. And sometimes you could get worse. You can lose a certain edge, or you become mellow or you flinch. Any kind of things can happen. And we're humans, but we just do our best. We speak truth. We tell stories and hope to meet our beautiful readers.
All right, we've covered a lot. Is there anything I haven't asked about that you think that we should cover?
I think I want to say to everyone that be true to yourself. Finish that book if that is important to you. Never lose sight of your goal. Like skiing, you need to look down the slope. It's a run. Don't get hung up on individual turns or mortified about how spectacularly you fall. You can always push yourself up, catch your breath, and start again. Be patient. Be good to those who support you. And keep your sense of humor. One day you will earn the respect from your readers or audience or whoever you are looking for.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. This has been phenomenal. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. You helped me a lot too with the podcast. I really appreciate your work and admire the artists and writers who graced your show.
Thank you. You can find Yang Huang at yanghuang.com, which is YangHuang. Over on Twitter, she is Yang Writes. She's over on Instagram as Yang Linda Huang, and over on Facebook at Yang Author. Her books, her 2 novels, My Good Son and Living Treasures, can be found wherever books are sold, as well as her story collection, My Old Faithful. My name again is Dan Blank. You can find me at wegrowmedia.com or on social media at Dan Blank. Thank you so much for listening until the end.